You know, he's really he's shameless in intellectual argument. He's absolutely without character, a moral foundation, or even intellectual substance.
Welcome back to the Getting Lit podcast. We're continuing our series on the books of Sally Rooney. Last episode, we looked at Conversations with Friends with Zach Langley Chichi. And this episode, we are looking at Sally Rooney's second book, Normal People. And to join me on this journey is writer Eddie Rathke. Welcome, Eddie.
Howdy. I'm here.
Yeah, you are here. I came across you via Kelby and David because you guys have a sort of association. I guess you're part of the whole Broken River collective, right?
Oh, yeah. The Broken River gang.
The gang, yeah. The posse.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, for listeners, those guys have been on as well. We did a whole series on Gene Wolfe, which was really great.
It was a good one.
Yeah, it was. It's good to do. It was good to do like four episodes on Gene Wolfe. I think he deserves it.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, there's 4 books. It's a lot to cover.
It is. So yeah, and I kind of, you've been on Agitator a lot, and I follow your Substack and shit like that. And I have actually read one of your books, and I'm going to read more. The book I read was Glossolalia, which was really good.
Yeah, that's a wild one.
yeah. I had to because I've got so much reading to do. I was doing all of Sally Rooney's books in the last week. I had to like listen to the audiobook for that one, and it was Kelby narrating it. I was really it's pretty funny.
He did such a good job. I had never, it was the first audiobook I had ever had done of one of my books, and I knew Kelby, but I was also like, I don't know, what if he sucks?
Yeah,
because like he's your friend, and you're just like, no, yeah, for sure, dude. And then like in the back of your head, you're like, oh man, what if this was a terrible idea? But I think he did such a good job.
He's great. He's very talented at voice work. And what I really loved about that book in particular, but I've also sort of read some of your other stuff, is I got a real sense of evocation through like multiple styles and voices, and so that was very nice. And that book was amazing. I feel like that needs to be more widely read so I can talk about it with people.
I agree. Buy my book. It's good.
Yeah. And the other thing about you that I think is really fascinating is like how fucking prolific you are. I've heard you mention, actually, I think probably on Agitator, or you've probably written about it on your Substack, how you quit the internet.
Yeah.
So tell me how this happened, why you did it, and how that all turned out for you, because you're back on the internet now. Yeah.
So starting a Substack was like coming back to life for people who used to follow me on the internet. So I was very active online, and especially, well, just because like literally just online, I was an annoying person. But I was very involved in like the indie lit scene, which is where I met David. We used to go to like AWP, which is a writer conference, and things like that. I had 3 novels come out, did a bunch of stuff with these people, spent way too much time reading their terrible books. Whoops. And then, the lead up to the Trump election was so annoying to me. I felt like everyone that so the easiest way to stop respecting a writer that you think you like is to hear them talk about politics, because most writers have never thought about politics.
And nor should they. They should be thinking about writing books.
Yeah, and it's like their thought process on stuff is sometimes just like bafflingly stupid. Like there's that meme that was like, we need to hire more prison guards. Like that's more female prison guards. That's like the problem with prisons. And it's like, that's literally how people think. And it's like, you don't think that there's maybe a deeper structural issue here? And they're like, I get maybe. It's like, yeah, just like think about things for 5 seconds. But what especially was annoying was so many of these writers sort of on purpose turn themselves into like second class pundits. Like they would just kind of like regurgitate what Rachel Maddow said. And it's like, I don't know. Rachel Maddow she's famous. She's a person. She's all right. I got no well, who cares what I think about Rachel Maddow? But it's like to turn your entire online life into that depressed me a lot. And then also just seeing how much people's online life sort of like, I don't know, swallowed their life. It and maybe a little of that was seeing how I had fallen into that trap at certain points as well, which is deeply unhealthy and makes you super unhappy. Like one thing that I've said for a long time is, you know, healthy people don't argue on the internet. Like happy people aren't sitting on the internet getting into fights because who cares? You know, like you have better things to do than argue with a toddler on the internet about, I don't know, Jamaican politics. Who cares?
I would take it a step further and say that happy people aren't watching people have arguments on the internet either. Like, because
that's super true.
I feel like that is a part of it too. Like you can be an onlooker. And that's why whenever I see like a dust up, I don't care who it is. Like if it's someone I've followed for a long time, whenever I see some like noxious dust up online, I just mute them. I have so many people muted because I just don't want to see that.
Yeah, I think that's like the other thing is you realize how annoying it is, just in general. Like whether you agree with them or not, and sometimes you'll see
it's irrelevant. If I agree with them, I'll still mute them. I just don't want to see it.
Yeah, and sometimes even like if you agree with them broadly, the way they're going about it makes you just like so embarrassed for them and for yourself. You're like, oh man, we're together on this, I guess.
I'm on a unity ticket with this person. Yeah.
Yeah. So that sort of was pushing me offline anyway. And then
when you say offline, what does that mean? That means like you completely deactivated or you deleted what?
Yeah. So this was back when like Facebook was the primary thing that people used. Twitter was also really popular, but I had never gotten that big into Twitter. But I deleted both of my accounts, Twitter and Facebook. And I permanently deleted, well, I guess I permanently deleted both of them. Facebook, you have to like really go through the settings to do that. You can't just like deactivate your account, because if I just deactivated my account, I could log in right now 8 years later and it would just pick up. But I permanently deleted it, which was I should have put more thought into it, because I lost a bunch of information, like pictures of me between the ages of 18 and 27 or something are basically just gone. Which is like, whatever. I don't know. It's, had I been able to change that at the time, I would have. I should have like done something to back that up or something. But even a month later, I was like, well, whoops, you know, like what am I gonna do? Yeah. You know, but yeah. So I completely deactivated from social media, so I was still using the internet. But I just was not on social media from basically 2016 until whenever I started my Substack, which I think was September of 2021.
Oh, wow. So, and in that time, you wrote a heap of books.
Yeah, I did a lot of stuff. I had a child. Yeah, life changed a lot. But I was always writing a lot of books, but I just happened to write a whole lot more during that period. Though strangely, like when you have a kid, it is very time consuming, especially the first year. And for a while, I was like, oh man, I haven't written anything in like a year. I wonder if I'll ever write anything again. And obviously I did. Like 6 months later, then I ended up writing 3 books in a row, which was basically, that was 2020. So it was like right when the pandemic started. I just wrote a bunch of books because what else was I going to do?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was I don't know, it was a good time. I think it was good for me in a lot of ways. Like, because I was so involved in the indie lit scene, I was mostly only reading indie lit. And I felt a lot of things about those people. Many of them bad.
So do I.
Yeah. And that was kind of what turned me away from it. And I was struggling to like enjoy books in 2015 as well. And I think, well, so in 2015, I was struggling to enjoy books. I think I read like 70 books, which probably sounds like a lot to a lot of people, but it was the least amount of books I've read in a year in a long time. And then the next year, I was reading a lot of like, commercial fiction, a lot of especially science fiction and fantasy. And I read 190 books. And, it was just like, I was like, oh man, books are fucking awesome. Like, why have I been reading all these terrible books?
Because
and then
was it because you were part of a scene and so you felt obliged to? Yeah,
absolutely. And, your friends are putting out books and you're reading them. And, because you're their friend, you're like, oh yeah, this is pretty good. And inside you're like, man, this sucks. And, and they're like, not even your real friends. They're like, they're Facebook friends,
Yeah.
And there's a big kind of like incestuous aspect to any small art community in general, I think, where it's like, I'll talk you up with the tacit kind of agreement that you'll also talk me up. And, that happened, unequally, not like necessarily just in my case, but just like in general, It's
funny though, because like I think that's true, but sometimes the more I think about it, the more I'm like, when I read like friends stuff, and it's almost like I'm being very honest, and I'm like, I like it kind of partially because of them. Like if it was really bad, obviously I wouldn't like it, but like usually it's like, oh, I can see their personality in it because I know them, and that like endears me to it, like in a much more kind of sort of robust way, like, and so but I feel like that's different to, especially someone you've formed a kind of close bond with versus a more transactional sort of thing, like where it's like everyone's in this community and they're all doing that. That's when it feels like it's a similar dynamic, but it's different because of this, like the transactional nature of it.
And like the understanding at a certain point that it is transactional. Like I also came to realize at a certain point that most of these people just didn't read any books, let alone like each other's books. Most of them just don't read books. The publisher of one of my books I am 100% sure. Well, I'll just say 99% sure that he never read the book that he published of mine, which is
how is that possible?
I don't know. I mean, it's so stupid. But that's the kind of people these people are. And I don't know. It's a stupid scene to be a part of. But like I used to write a lot of nonfiction. I obviously write a lot of that now, and a lot of what I used to write was like primarily book reviews and things like that, and movie reviews. And I had been told by many different magazines in like the indie lit scene, after sending like a negative review, like, oh, we don't publish negative reviews. I was like, oh, that's odd. And it's I mean, I understand why, because like the economics of being an independent artist are what they are, and it's like, it's hard enough to get someone to read your book. But then if the first thing they see when they look it up is because like often I would be the only person reviewing this book, like in general, and so if the only thing you see is a negative review, it's like, well, that book it was already dead, but now it's like buried. Like, but at the same time, it's like you can't have an art scene that isn't critical of itself. Yeah, if there's no self-reflection from any point, if everyone's just like, if every blurb on every book is that this is the best book ever, it just flattens the entire scene.
Which
and
is
you
why
see how like,
sorry,
go ahead. Oh, I was gonna say, yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You're the guest. You go.
Yeah, it's like you see why most of these books never went anywhere. Most of these people never went anywhere, and the few people who did kind of reach escape velocity, they sort of like drag. Well, they didn't so much drag the ladder up as like they didn't bring anyone with them. They just kind of like, I made it. It's like, oh, well, can you like recommend, like, why?
Yeah.
It's like, well, aren't we like aren't we friends? Aren't we part of like a scene? Like, isn't this, an art community? It's like, well, not really.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean about like how that when you have like your close friends that you sort of made bonds with, that works. I think a bit like we were saying before, the gang, your gang, like that.
Right.
that to me is sort of a model that works because you all kind of, lift each other up and help each other out and stuff. And I have the same thing with, a few writers that I know here that, we help each other out and stuff. And that is way more kind of, it never feels transactional though. It's just like, I like this person and I like their work, and maybe I like their work because I like this person, or maybe vice versa. I don't know, but who cares? Like, I just want to help this person,
Yeah. And like in that, you do kind of like scaffold for each other, My friend Kyle Muntz, who is my co-writer on the Shattered Stars, which is the science fiction.
Yeah, that's the one I want to read next, because like I fucking love Star Trek and like,
oh man, you're gonna. I love that series. And it is like it's episodic. Mm-hmm. It's meant to be like you can read them as you want. You don't have to necessarily start at the beginning. I mean, you may as well, because why not? But you don't have, like, I don't know. The characters are the same. It's meant to be like old Star Trek, where it's like, if you miss an episode, you're not like, oh, well, shit. I got to wait for it to come out on VHS. And they're all short. They're fun. I like writing them a lot. But Kyle and he has been my first reader, and I've been his first reader for like over 10 years.
Amazing.
And we've read, I probably read, I don't know, 15 of his books or something like that. And it's funny because over time, I think we've made each other better in a lot of ways, but we've also sort of become more like one another as writers, which is like a little bit funny, because like, especially back then and for most of this time, it's just been me and him in dialogue with each other's work. And so it's natural that like you start to influence each other. And so it was also a natural thing to kind of start co-writing books, but that mostly started on accident as well, because he struggles with starting books. And so I wrote the first like 20 pages of a book, and I was like, okay, now you write the rest. But instead he wrote like 20 pages and sent it back to me, and I was like, no, like this is your book, do it. And then so we started trading like that. And after that book, which was Sing Behemoth Sing, which is kind of a funny, wild book, we weren't discussing the book as we were doing it. I was just like throwing it over to him, and he was throwing it over to me. And it made for some funny like surprises that we'd give each other, because I'd read what he did and just be like, what the fuck? what am I supposed to do now?
So is that the way when you co-write? Because I've never done co-writing. I probably don't. Maybe I could do it. I don't think I have the temperament for it though. But is it always just chapter by chapter, like back and forth that way, or is there a different process each time?
Yeah. So like for that first one, we weren't talking about the book at all. And then when we went into the Shattered Stars, we like came in kind of, we were talking about, because we wanted it to be good. We wanted it to like go seamlessly. But it helps because he lives in China and I live in the US, so we're on opposite time zones. Kind of like if me and you were to co-write a book. So like I always start the book and then I send it to Kyle. And then so when I go to sleep, he's like waking up. And so then he writes, we usually write like 4,000-ish, 3,000 to 5,000 words per person per day. So the books get written fast because of that.
So it's like a ritual almost.
Yeah. And it's like, I write, let's say 4,000 words. I send it to him. I go to sleep. I wake up and now it's 8,000 words long and I start writing. And it's like, the book basically just writes itself while I'm asleep. It's great.
That is great. Better than AI.
Yeah, it's way better. It's funny because so far so I've started every book and he has finished every book, like written the final thing. And then we kind of like usually I do an edit and then he does like 7 edits because he's like that.
Yeah. Well, he lives in China, so
yeah, but it's funny because like sometimes when I feel like he doesn't know what to do with himself, so he'll be like, I'm gonna edit this book again. I'm like, no, leave it alone. Part of me is like afraid that he's gonna, I don't know, do something wrong.
I do think you can over edit stuff though. Like I think
so too.
It can be overworked, but
yeah. And I know that I'm not gonna read it again to check because I'm a very lazy person. So I just trust.
Yeah. In terms of genres, like I love that you're into fantasy and science fiction because I am as well. That's the last book I wrote was like probably going to be my last sort of like, I don't know what you would call it, like contemporary literary fiction, because like I think I'm going down the path of like genre fiction now.
It's way more fun.
It's so much more fun. And also you can be more I think in the last book I wrote, I was sort of like, part of unlocking that for me was just like doing it the way I wanted rather than like the way that, you know, the idea of like a contemporary Australian novel is supposed to be. And I just did it. And it like I finished it really fast because of that. And then I feel like in genre, even though genre has so many like tropes and shit like that, you can also just do that just the way you want it. And you like just have complete freedom, particularly in those genres. That's one of the things that disappoints me about a lot of fantasy and science fiction is that people are on the rails a lot rather than just like doing whatever the fuck you want because you can, you know?
Yeah. And I think, it's called commercial fiction for a reason, I think.
Yeah.
And there's the bad side of that is like what you're talking about. So if you want to be successful as a fantasy writer, there are really two elements that I think are most important. One is familiarity with the twist. So it's like the reason most fantasy books are medieval England-esque is because if I don't have to really imagine that much to know exactly what you're talking about. You know, when you're 10 pages into Game of Thrones, you know exactly where you are and what everything looks like. Have you ever read well, I guess Gene Wolfe is a good example. Gene Wolfe is not that way.
No.
You know, it's like it's almost aggressively not that way. And so even though Gene Wolfe has a sort of like enormous cult appeal, he's never going to be, well, I mean, he's dead now, so he can't be, but like even if he was still alive, he would never be a George R.R. Martin type. Because he is purposefully defamiliarizing yourself from a world, and making a new world out of it. And then like, so that's part of it. Give them something that feels familiar, but then like enough twists that you're like, ooh, isn't this super creative? And it's like, I mean, a little bit, you know, it's England with dragons. And the other trick is to make the reader feel smart by giving them a mystery that they will solve by just paying attention a little bit.
That goes for every genre, actually. All
it really does.
Fiction.
I mean, I'm stupid, so I never figure stuff out until like maybe like a paragraph before the person in like one of the characters is like, oh, this is the solution. I'm like, oh man, I beat him to it. And it's like, even as an adult, I still feel that kind of like sense of accomplishment. And it's like, there's really nothing that is what makes books addictive. Is it when just by paying attention to the book that you're staring at, when that makes you feel smart, it's like, it's this little like extra kick of dopamine beyond everything like creative and cool. It's like, oh man, I figured it out. That was Voldemort the whole time.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, I mean, that's what Game of Thrones is like. You know, no one was that shocked when it turned out that like Jon Snow was a Targaryen. But like before the TV show started, like there was so much theorizing, and because there's no proof yet, I think this is actually another secret weapon, is have a long gestation period with those mysteries so that people just endlessly talk about them, and it makes the fandom grow.
Yeah, but that's a double-edged sword, I think.
It is.
I think by the time fucking Game of Thrones, like I read those books way before the show. I think probably not when they first came out, but like a few years after. I think I've started the first one in like 97 or 98 or something like that. Yeah. So, like by the time that show premiered, everyone already basically de facto knew that secret was true, because like there'd been a critical mass online that's what the visions mean. That's what, like, you know, Ned Stark's sister was saying and all that sort of shit.
Yeah.
That I think some writers can get a bit like spooked by that and be like, well, I can't go with the obvious now because like everyone has sort of worked it out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's so
That
in a way that it generates a kind of fandom, but it also writers can get skittish around like, oh, I can't do the obvious thing now. I feel like that is why George R. R. Martin is never going to finish that series either, because there is no possible way he can do it that is going to surprise everyone, and he wants to surprise everyone, you know?
Yeah.
I think he just needs to let that go, to be quite honest.
I agree. I think there's two things. Like, so I had never even heard of it until I saw the trailer for the first season. I was like, oh, what the hell's that? And I was like, oh, based on a book, I'll look that up. And then I read all of them like right there. So I read, because then the fifth one came out like a few months before the show premiered, and I was all caught up. But yeah, I think that the way, so it's like, you know, the series starts in a fixed place and then it sprawls like over 2 continents. And I think the point, it's like at the height of sprawl at the end of book 5. And I think pulling all of that together is, I do not envy him. You know, it's like, and so I can understand why, trying to fit all that pulling back into 2 books while still like creating a satisfying ending is that sucks. Yeah, I think the show did a good job there, because the show was just merciless. They're like, we're just going to kill 3/4 of these people and narrow the show back down.
Yeah.
They made a lot of other problems. Yeah. I mean, it's
get everyone all in one place and then just kill them all off. Which is what the show did, basically.
Yeah. And it's super concise. The show did a lot of other things, foolishly, famously, but, I think that was like a good way to condense the story back down. And it's probably what he needs to do. But like, I think part of the thing too is, I think fantasy writers are especially prone to this because they get so obsessed with their world building. George Martin has published, 600,000 words of his world building now in between the 5th and 6th books. And so I think, and like when you read him, I don't know when the last time you read it, but I just reread his books last year. And it's like the fixation on minutia is part of what makes those books like intoxicatingly
the
good.
Feasts.
Yeah.
And the
jousting. And just all these little details, like you can tell that he is just like obsessed with his world and he loves it so much, and that can get in people's way.
This is why I really appreciated reading Gene Wolfe, because I think we talked about this in a couple of the episodes, is that his approach to world building is like much more, he does, go on flights of fancies and does things that aren't strictly necessary to the story, but it's always quite, it's by implication rather than like explication, it's like, he's not going on and on and on about like the feasts and shit like that. Or like,
even when he is having a character like explain something important to Severian is always not paying attention.
Yeah.
It's like, it's such a funny way to do it. I mean, I've stolen that idea where it's just, I think it's such a clever way to do things where it's like, this is really important information and you're giving it to the reader, but you're giving it in a way that is very funny, because the person who is being told this is like, just kind of like looking off. It's like, hey, idiot, trying to tell you the end of the book here.
It's
I love
great.
That.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, it's funny to me how much Tolkien influenced like the expansive world building, because I also reread The Lord of the Rings last year for the first time, and like, since I was, 13 or something. And, it's funny how little of the world building is in those books. Like he famously did, mountains of world building, but the books just read as books.
Yeah.
And there's like little bits of color here and there where they'll like mention they'll like sing some ancient song and you're like, all right, cool. And then you just keep going with hobbits eating, or smoking. It's like, and I think that's the way to do it.
Yeah, there's a great essay which I think I've shared around online somewhere by M. John Harrison, where he talks about
that one.
world building as the clumping boot of nerdism or something like that. And it's so true.
Yeah, I actually wrote an essay where I start with that quote because it's so good. Because the essay is called "World Building is a Trap" because of that exact reason. It's like do all your world, fill up notebooks with your shit, but realize that no one will ever care about that until you are like a gargantuan bestseller. So like, don't stick it in your book.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Don't.
Just give people as much as they need to understand what's happening.
Yeah, that's what
And if
people
you're
do in TV. They do those Bibles, right? Yeah, and none of that, very little of that actually gets into the show,
Yeah, exactly. And it's like to the extent that people need to understand what's going on, that's like how much you need in there. And like you can add in, what we call in board gaming flavor text, which is just like, or like in Dark Souls, people will read the item description and be like, oh, that is wild. It's like stuff like that is good. And it really catches your attention and as a reader makes you feel like this world, which maybe has felt very surface level, is like, has great depth to it, even if it doesn't.
Yeah.
Like, I write a lot of fantasy, but I don't have like world building documents. I make stuff up on the fly, and then I've now I at least keep a second document where I track what I make up, because that can be, when you're like on page 300 writing a book and you're like, wait, what was that thing? And then you're trying
but that's the more kind of creative, fun way to do it, is to do it on the fly rather than just like it's not a D&D campaign, it's a book.
Yeah, exactly. But man, if you are writing a fantasy book and just winging it, which I think is what Gene Wolfe did as well, it's like keep notes, because especially on like terms that you made up, because trying to find that stupid term that is either, I don't necessarily make up words. I usually just steal a word from another language. And, I just, cause like we speak English, for a fantasy book, I just use Lithuanian, and like Lithuanian may as well be like Elvish to most people.
Why not?
Except for Lithuanians.
And then when they, in the Lithuanian translation, they can just make it English.
Yeah. Who cares?
Yeah.
Well, that would be like the funniest things. They're like, this is just like this other word. I was like, oh, that is that word. I just stole it.
Yeah, well, it's like fucking Harry Potter. All the spells are in Latin for some reason. Like,
why not?
But okay, so we'll get on to talking about Rooney soon. But what have you been reading lately other than Rooney?
So just this week, I have read 5 Richard Brautigan books.
Okay.
I don't know why. They're all really short. Like, they're so short that you kind of read them on accident. Have you ever read him?
No.
His books are very surreal and strange and like, kind of nonsense. They're almost, like Lewis Carroll a little bit.
Oh, cool.
In that, like, this is especially like, so world building is funny with regard to him. It's like trying to keep track of the world is like almost beside the point. It's like, things are just happening. They're goofy. They're weird. It's all like psychedelic 60s. And I don't know. They're funny, weird, odd books, but they're so short that you just kind of like, and the chapters are usually like 500 words. So you're just like burning through it. And it's funny because I had a theory for a long time that, really short chapters make books more addictive, because of just like the physical act of turning pages quickly it's kind of like it tricks the reader's brain into thinking this is a page turner. Like Glossolalia is a good example of that. There are like 100 chapters or something like that. And the book is not that long.
Page. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of them are just like one word. And so you're moving through books really fast. And, after like half an hour, you're like 50 pages in and you're like, oh man, this book really flies by.
I feel like a real cheeky thing to do would be to like front load your book with like really short chapters and then have really long ones towards the end, because it's like, you're committed now.
I a little bit did that in Glossolalia, partly because I think it's really funny. So most of the chapters are, I think the longest chapter is like 1,500 words until you get to one that is like 5,500. It's like the interview between Inaluke and Akul.
Yeah,
that's like near the end of the book. That one. So yeah, that's kind of why I did that. I thought it was funny to like have all these super short chapters and then just like 20 nonstop pages.
It's brilliant. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, in terms of so Sally Rooney, you signed up to do this. What is your history with her like, and why this book? Is because you kind of signed up to do this one in particular. Have you read all of her books?
I have.
Yeah.
So I read Normal People. That was my first book. I think I read it in 2020.
Okay.
And it was a gigantic book. I don't often pay attention to those things, but it kind of found. I probably actually was just like walking by it at the library, and I was like, oh, I've heard about this.
Mm-hmm.
And I just burned through it. It is I love it a lot. I mean, we're going to talk about it, but I think part of it is I went to Trinity College a few years before this. Yeah. Like I was there from the fall of 2008 until like June of 2009. So I was there like 2 years before the characters were.
Oh wow.
Which so there's like that kind of element of nostalgia to it as well. But yeah. So but I like burned through this book. And then I read Conversations with Friends right afterwards, which is good. I think it's better if you read it first, because I've sort of described this elsewhere as like Normal People is. Have you read Kazuo Ishiguro?
Years ago, I read Remains of the Day. I think, yeah.
So Remains of the Day is probably his best book, but his two books before it are they're good. But if you read them after Remains of the Day, they feel like practice for Remains of the Day. And that's kind of how I felt about Conversations with Friends.
Interesting, because I actually think that Conversations with Friends is better than Normal People.
Ooh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I read her third book, whatever it's called.
Beautiful World, Where Are You? The worst title ever.
I read it when it came out, which was not that long ago. And yeah, I didn't even remember the title. That book is fine. I think it's a bold choice to sort of Philip Roth yourself, which is like write a book about a super famous author.
Philip Roth. You use Philip Roth as a verb. I love it.
Well, man, it's funny. So I read Philip Roth for like the first time probably a few months before that book came out, and I read his Zuckerman novels, like the first 5 or something like that, and 2 of them in a row are about how hard and annoying it is to be a famous author. And I was like, man, that is like, doing it once is a bold choice. Doing it twice in a row is like fucking nuts.
I love it. I love them. Yeah. I love the balls to do that.
Yeah. And it's like, oh man. Yeah. Just like the angriest man in literature. But yeah, so then I read, Beautiful World, Where Are You? And I was like, oh, bold choice, Sally. Good for you.
It's so I'm interested in what appeals to you about her as someone who writes, fiction that is kind of, very far away from this. I don't want to say mundane, but like ordinary kind of like contemporary, sort of living and loving novels. What about it kind of appeals to you?
Well, I would say that my first and third novel that I wrote, which were also my first and third published, though in opposite ways. The third one I wrote was the first one published, and the first one I wrote was the third one published. Were very, despite being more kind of like magical realist in certain ways, were much more like this book, where it was just about relationships with people and love and stuff like that. And then after reading this book, those 3 novels that I wrote like right in a row, those happen to all be contemporary literary realism. So it was like definitely in part because reading Normal People, I was like, man, this is why I used to like this genre, and this is what is so good about it. One thing that I think is that she does super cleverly with Normal People is she, rather than kind of giving you a will they, won't they, like fall in love, she just like dumps you into it right at the start. She's like, these people love each other. Here's why. Here's the rest. And it's like, man, who does that? Like who starts their book by being like, this is a love story between these people, and they're gonna tell each other right away, like how that, you know, they want each other and they're together. And you're like, why is this, you know, 300 pages? I feel like this is the ending. And it's like, well, I mean, that's why. But it's so few, I don't know if I've ever seen someone do it this way, but I think it gives her so much flexibility then to sort of like push and pull and twist on you. Because the emotions, and this is like, when I was reading this book, I felt like my emotions were so like on the surface, just like outside of the book. Like it really got inside me. And probably because they had a kind of like relationship like this with a friend. And it is a strange, uncomfortable, but also like weirdly beautiful relationship to have with someone. And it didn't go well for me. So but like this book, there was a point in it where I threw up reading it.
Oh, wow. Oh, I love when you get like physiologically affected by a book. It happened to me the first time this year, actually. Never gotten sick.
I had never had something like that. And I'm not an anxious person. Like I go about my life just like with the absence of anxiety. But this book is so anxiety inducing that I threw up. And it's not like it was one of those, probably not a moment that you might be thinking of. It was like, there's just so much tension that she's able to pack into a moment where like Connell and Marianne are just like sitting near each other, but not talking. And it was like, it was a moment like that. It was actually the moment at the swimming pool. I was just like, this is like too fucking much for me. But then of course, like I couldn't stop reading it either.
Yeah. You couldn't stop reading. You had to go have a tactical spew first. Yeah. So anyway, in terms of the plot, I'll just give a quick sort of plot summary of it. So it begins in a small town in Ireland, and it follows two characters. One of the things that's really interesting to me stylistically is how it shifts between their point of view, but we can talk about that later. So we've got Connell, and he's a kind of popular, well-liked, kind of, would we say he's a jock? Like,
yeah, I would say essentially, yes.
Yeah. And he has this, the very first chapter, he strikes up this relationship with Marianne, who is like, fairly smart, academically gifted, but apparently she's hideous. Like people like make out like she's, she's unpopular. Interesting thing about them is the different class. Connell is from more of a working class background. His mother works as a maid for Marianne's family. And so despite this sort of different social status, I guess, they kind of form this connection and they have this secret romance. And it starts in high school and then I think it follows them over about 3 or 4 years, right? Like, as
it
they
follows
kind
them
of
all the way through university. So
through university, yeah,
like 4.5 years.
Yeah. And so a lot of it is based around Connell's anxiety about like being seen to be with her, and her. There's a lot of in Marianne's family. There's a lot of abuse. Her dad was abusive, and her brother is currently still abusive to her. And so it's basically about the ebb and flow of their relationship and how like they kind of Connell and Marianne sort of separate and then come back together and separate and come back together. And then that's basically the entire plot. There's more sort of little bits to it that we can talk about, but yeah, that's sort of the setup of it.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I think one of the interesting things is as soon as they go to Dublin at Trinity College is because the class dynamics are different in Dublin, where there's lots of rich people, especially at Trinity College. Marianne is now cool. And Connell is like an outcast because he is so out of his class. And so he struggles to relate to people, whereas like back in Sligo, their hometown, everyone is just like him, And Marianne, you kind of get the feeling that like her family is wealthier than everyone else. So it's like
Yeah.
she's kind of like in her own class and stuff, doesn't have the kind of like cultural touchstones that everyone else has.
Yeah, and this is very similar to Conversations with Friends as well, which I talked about in the last episode, where there's all these sorts of class dynamics, and Frances is a student, a spoken word poet, lol. And she gets an allowance from her parents while she's sort of studying. Like it's that kind of, that kind of woman is clearly like a stand-in for Sally Rooney, because clearly she's from that sort of background. But one of the things, again, like the last episode, I had sort of a general theme, and one of the things I think we could talk about as a general theme for this one is the theme of exchange. So, to some extent, I think that idea of exchange could be applied to all of her novels, because so much of her work is about people conversing, or, it's very dialogue heavy. Like we were saying before we recorded, the adaptations are pretty straightforward because essentially the novels are TV scripts. But I think it's really prominent here. And I think this is chiefly because of not solely, but the unique structure of the book, because like I said before, it's in present tense, and it alternates between Marianne and Connell's POV. So it's almost like we get one person's view of the relationship, then we get another over time. And the crucial thing is that it moves forward in time as well. It's not just like, you'll get an event from Marianne's point of view, and then you'll get the same event from Connell's. It's like years, months later, and things like that.
The way time dilates is really interesting.
Yeah. Speak on it.
I was just like, sometimes a chapter, like the next chapter will be like 2 weeks later, and sometimes it's like 7 months later, and you're just like, well, shit, like what happened?
Yeah, and towards the end, there's even one that's like 5 minutes later.
Yeah. I think that's kind of like the opposite of what we were talking about earlier, where it's like, you do a bunch of big gaps, and it's like, and now here for the first time is one where it's almost an overlapping POV, and I think it's a well-placed time to use that, because I would say that that's sort of like the probably the real climax of the novel, to the extent that a novel like this has a climax. Is it more emotionally peaked than any other of the emotionally tense places? Like, not really, but it is like, I think it's like, the final turn, I guess you could say, in their relationship.
Yeah. And I find this really interesting too, because like we said, time dilates, the narrative spans several years, and it captures this, ebb and flow of their connection. But the interesting thing about the way that's rendered is that, we've spoken about that a lot of her books are conversation heavy, but this, like, going from POV to POV, back and forth in that way, makes the chapters almost, or the entire novel, seem like a conversation. It's sort of like a meta conversation in the storytelling itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I think that's interesting. I hadn't thought of it like that. But I like that. I like that conception.
Yeah. What did you think about the way, because this is written, in some ways it's written very similarly to the first book, but in other ways, like I said, present tense, which is always a bugbear of mine. Like I feel like it's something that can really grate on me, because my nerdy, like, logical brain is like, usually when people use it, they're actually doing past tense.
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain. You probably get it because you're a writer, but like, I don't know how to explain this clearly for audiences. But when writers sort of make it present tense just to make it seem more like
dynamic,
but it's just, you should just write this in past tense.
Well, I think that's an interesting thing. So I have, I'm sort of like, I don't know, I'm just an idiot. I'm like blind to stuff. Like, I didn't even notice the first time I read it that it was in present tense, which is rereading it, I was like, oh, this is in present tense. And it's like a lot of people have the same issue with second person. They're like, I'm not doing that. It's like, well, yeah, I know, but but I think it's like, so if you write in present tense or in second person, you are making an artistic statement, whether you really want to or not. Because so many people have issues with that. Issues that aren't even like, I mean, it's something that you can't really control. It's just like, it's this weird, it's like if someone has like a really, I don't know, like nasally voice and just bothers you.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not their fault and it's not really your fault, but like, you can't help it. I think that's how a lot of, people react to second person and present tense, where it's just like, why is this like this?
Yeah. Well, some writers want to like just like do it just because. Like I did write a story. I think it was last year. It was published in Expat Press that was in second person and present tense. The most annoying story I should have titled that actually. But yeah, like sometimes people just want the challenge, you know? But in terms of a whole novel, it's not that distracting for me, but it is sort of like, particularly because she's dealing with time, and I didn't quite kind of understand what the present tense was really doing, other than like a kind of cheap sort of idea to make it more dynamic. Like we said, you know, it could have worked just as well in past tense.
And like I said, I don't know, I like don't even notice prose style a lot of times because I don't know, my brain like broke on that stuff. I feel like like you read enough difficult books and you can't even like tell what's difficult anymore. You're just like, I don't know, it's just a book. Like, you just read it.
And I mean, one of the things that's interesting about her is that you don't like, her prose style is both you know, unadorned and kind of spare, but also kind of frustrating, because it's not spare in the way of like a Raymond Chandler or something like that, in terms of like, it's not about the story. It's almost about like she's showing off. Like it's her debating roots, I think. Like she's just like, I can kind of, you know, give you a story, you know.
To me, it just feels very commercial. I like it. It did not surprise me. So what did actually surprise me when I read it, I was like, man, I can't believe that this book is this popular. But at the same time, it's like, I also understand, because there's nothing difficult about the book. The book is very inviting in its use of language. It's just, and I think that's kind of like maybe the benefit, or at least conceit behind like the present tense. It's like, we're just going to flow. You know, we're just talking. It might kind of play into your idea that this is sort of like a meta conversation. You know, it's like you're in the conversation right now, so it's just happening. So like in terms of style and all that, it makes sense that this is, you know, an international bestseller, because it's very easy to read. What surprised me about it being in international bestseller is like, it's a fucked up book. You know?
Yes. That's what I was saying with Zach in the last episode, is that the way that these books are marketed is so bizarre, because you see these like, you know, brightly colored pastel color. And this is in all, like, there's obviously different covers in the UK market versus US and others, but they're always the same kind of idea. Like, you know, bright blues, greens, reds, or whatever, with a twee little like illustration on it, and kind of like blocky, unoffensive fonts. But these characters and these stories are like so dark and abrasive and just sort of like, it's just so weird, because it looks like, oh, here's some modern chick lit for you. That's what the covers look like anyway.
That's exactly what I was going to say, is like, it's very much marketed as just like, here's another chick lit book. And I don't even really know what chick lit is, because I don't know if I've ever read one. But no, but I think that is what they were going for with like the cover and the marketing. It's like, this is a book about a smart lady and her relationship with this dude. And it's like, sure. And that's also, you know, you hear that and like, I have no interest in that. But then you read it and you're like, oh fuck, like are other chick lit books like this? It a little bit I read this later, but did you ever read A Little Life?
No, but Zach, who I had on the last episode, has, and he fucking hates her because he's like, she's a manipulative witch who like crucifies gay men for her aesthetic pleasures and shit like that.
There is but like that's another book where I knew it was a sad book.
Yeah.
Because you can kind of look at the cover and it's like an agonized man. I was like, okay, whatever. But I finally read it, like a year or two ago. So it had been out for like a decade. And I was shocked by how like fucked up it is.
Mm.
And it also has like clever, interesting structure so there's 4 main characters. And well, there's really one main character, but you don't meet him until he's the 4th POV that you meet.
Mm.
And once you meet him, it mostly sticks with him for the rest of like the 900 pages or whatever. But the book is like a normal literary MFA style novel until you get to him as well. And then it becomes so fucking dark that you're just like what was that? What? I did not think that was this book.
What did I sign up for? Yeah.
Yeah. Like, no, like literally like by this point you're like 100 pages in and it's a book about, like young artistic men in New York. And I was like, I've read a million of these books. Like I'll give it a little longer. I know I'm going to hate it.
Mm.
And then it comes to this other guy's POV and you're just like, holy shit. I did not think we were going there.
Mm.
And the places it goes, it is the opposite of Dr. Seuss. But
yeah. So do you think Rooney is doing the same thing here with this book? Like that it's sort of Trojan-horsing something that is a lot more dark? I think it is, but also like I'm not really that familiar with the genre like you as well. Yeah. So I'm not sure if it's doing some kind of genre comment or.
Yeah, and it's also like I have a feeling that she just wrote a book.
Yeah.
It's the marketing department that decided this would sell better with, if we pitch it like this. So I think the marketing department Trojan-horsed a fucked up book to a lot of young women. I was reading an essay that she wrote about Ulysses recently. I only read a little bit of it because it was really long and
much like Ulysses.
Yeah, like it's funny. It's kind of embarrassing to be like, oh man, I couldn't even read this like I don't know like 10-page essay, but but I was just like, oh, I get it. But so it's like she's a well-read person and she's definitely in a tradition of like literary, female writers. She's going for like capital A art, I think, but that is not how the book is pitched to the public.
No, not at all. Like it's super commercial in terms of the way it's pitched.
Yeah, I mean, marketed. even the absence of quotation marks is like should be a signal to people that like this is more in line with someone like Cormac McCarthy. I mean, kind of not really, but also a little bit exactly like that. Sort of maybe the female, coin flip of Cormac McCarthy's masculinity is Sally Rooney's femininity. But it's just little markers like that. Like not having quotation marks is a signal to a certain kind of reader where this book belongs in like a spectrum. But if you're just a normal chick lit reader, I don't know what you would think of that. You might be put off by it, but I guess not put off enough that you stopped reading.
Yeah, sometimes I think though the semiotics of that is just that people are doing it because it looks cool. They like writers are doing it because it looks cool. I'm not above that. Like I remember
it looks way better.
I wrote a story once with the modernist dashes for dialogue rather than, and that was fun. And I really literally the only artistic kind of, I guess, justification was this. I like dashes.
Yeah,
like
I
that's.
Yeah, I've done. I don't know if I've written a book with dashes, but most of my older stuff doesn't have quotation marks. I wrote an experimental fantasy novel that was published 10 years ago. Well, next year it'll be 10 years. And there are no quotation marks in that. And people didn't like it.
Oh, really? Yeah.
For a number, not just because of that, but I think that it's funny because at the time, this shows you how stupid I was. I was like, no, because it's experimental fantasy, I'll be able to pull people who like, sort of like James Joycean fiction and people who want like Game of Thrones. When the truth is that neither of those people want this.
Neither of those people want the other. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like combining them is just poisoning 100%.
Have you ever read, this isn't strictly like epic fantasy, and now I'm just delving into like book recommendations now that have nothing to do with Sally Rooney, but that's fine. That's the kind of show it is. It's not strictly like epic fantasy. It's sort of more science fictional fantasy kind of hodgepodge. It's called Hal Duncan's Vellum. Have you ever read that?
No.
It's that you probably like that if you're into experimental like fantastic stuff, because I remember he's like a crazy Scottish writer. I don't know if he still writes, but it's a sort of like a cubist. He describes it as a cubist fantasy novel.
That's wild.
So, yeah, yes.
You say Hal Duncan? I'm gonna write this.
Hal Duncan, yeah. Vellum, and then the sequel to it is called Ink. So yeah, you probably get a kick out of that.
Yeah, it's funny because for a long time after I left the literary scene, I was kind of like, maybe I don't like these experimental, difficult books like modernist prose and stuff like that. Which is funny because like I used to say Virginia Woolf was one of my favorite writers. And then this year I reread James Joyce's novels, except Finnegan's Wake, and I was like, man, maybe I do still really like this stuff.
Yeah. Well, I felt the same way, even reading Gene Wolfe, and you know, that kind of, he was doing what you were doing with your book, right? Like trying to
he was more successful at it.
Marry the experimental with the kind of fantastic science fantasy, whatever the genre it is. But yeah, so I don't know, it still appeals to me, but I still like the kind of commercial stuff as well. I think like the aim is like you write the experimental stuff for yourself and then make some money on the commercial stuff. Like that's the ultimate goal, I guess.
And I think that like the real trick is the more conceptually difficult it is to picture something, the clearer your language needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're Gene Wolfe, who's just like the more conceptually difficult this gets, the harder it's going to be to understand what's going on. But in general, if you're not Gene Wolfe, that's kind of the way you do it. And then it's like, if things are clearer and more easy to understand and like mundane, you can really muck around with the language and get really experimental there, because it's like you're just walking down the street. You can kind of do this. You can fuck around with the language and do interesting things there because it's not difficult to follow the like what's physically happening.
Yeah, well, that's something about Rooney that I think is interesting, because, like, as you said, she puts on airs of being like this capital L literary writer, but her writing is not literary in the traditional sense. Like, it's not really demanding of the reader at all. No. There's even sort of like, quote unquote writing rules, which I don't really believe in. I'm guessing you don't either, but like where that she doesn't break, but like just doesn't pay attention to. And I think it takes a kind of balls to do that. Like the basic one, like show, don't tell. She barely shows. Yeah. Like it's all tell.
Yeah. But I think, so something that she does I mean, even like the way that I was talking about earlier, where like she just front loads you with these people are in love, like right off the bat. It's like
just tells
you're
you
not supposed you're not supposed to do that, you know. But I think that the way that she shows you is, it's what I really like it, because she is literally just showing you like body language.
Yes,
it's like the way that Connell doesn't touch Marianne, and the way that like, and often just like the way he speaks, where it's like he's very he struggles just to say what he means, and he struggles just to say anything at all, in contrast to Marianne, who just like outright is like, I love you, use me. Like use my body however you want. He's like, he like doesn't even know how to handle hearing that. But so I think that is it's again, it's like reading it, I was like, I can't believe that this is a bestseller, because that is usually something that people will just like fly over and not even catch, But I think because of how clear her language is, and like the command that she has over her characters, you can really inhabit those scenes. Whereas like if she was writing a little bit more linguistically aggressively, you wouldn't get the same sort of like, the impact of a silence wouldn't hit the same, because the language is doing something while the silence is supposed to hit you.
Yeah. Finish your thought.
No, I often end a thought with a conjunction for no reason.
So, and well, I'm not even just talking about like, experimentation or trying to be more complicated with language, like just sort of basic rules that you're taught in creative writing class and stuff like that. Just things that are in a lot of books that just aren't in here, and in a lot of like very commercial and to some extent literary books, like there's not a lot of sensory detail. There's not a lot of like description of Dublin. They're just in Dublin. Yeah. She might mention the Liffey now and again, like I said in the last episode, or she'll talk about like they were in this neighborhood, or they were in this street in Sligo or whatever, which I find very interesting, because, and that is possibly part of the appeal as well, is that this could be set anywhere, because the setting is so, I don't want to say unremarkable, but unremarked upon, I guess, like, because the setting is the interiority of these characters.
That's a good point. Yeah. I think the way that people often talk about how Charles Dickens is difficult to read now because he will describe a door for 1,000 words.
I love that.
Yeah, but it's like, you understand historically why he did that too. Like he was literally inventing London for the world. Even English people, you could have lived 50 miles from London and never even seen the outskirts of London. Like he, talk about world building. He was literally inventing a city for the world. Some other authors have done that with where they live. But you don't need to do that anymore since the invention of the camera. Like you just don't. And especially since like the development of, moving pictures. If you say on the, like literally, you don't even have to say it in the text. If just like, chapter 1, London, 1851, like, right. You just pictured it, it's like, you know more or less what that is. So if you say this takes place in Dublin, even if you've never been to Dublin, you're like, I get it. That's a place. It's a city. Like,
it's cold. It's wet. People are drunk.
I get it. I've seen movies, and so I don't think that you really have to go into that much detail. You do see it a lot more in fantasy books because, you are inventing a world. But even there, it's like the degree to which you need to explain that stuff is different now than it was when Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings, because of how much fantasy media there's been since then. If I say, this is like medieval Karukian or whatever, people are going to be like, I get it. And it's like, I've told you nothing. But it's like, I've seen Lord of the Rings. I've seen Game of Thrones. I get it. Like, I know where we are. This is like Winterfell, right? Yeah. Keep going.
Well, I think that's, I'm not complaining about the lack of sensory detail, but I'm saying that what's interesting is that all of these kind of rules that she's not paying attention to. I don't want to call them rules, just sort of conventions.
Yeah.
That she's not paying attention to that exist in popular fiction. And yet these are very popular books. I think it's actually fascinating, like how she did this, because
yeah, I agree.
And I think it is, it's strangely, even though there isn't this kind of visual sensory detail, it's strangely cinematic, but not, because you're not necessarily picturing everything in the room, like in that Dickensian sense, but you do are very close to these characters, and you are, they're talking a lot, so you get to know them very well, in sort of no uncertain terms.
I think your point is a really good one about, like, you know, the book takes place in Dublin, but it really takes place inside them. Like, you don't really get the sense of the shape of a room, but you understand the internal landscape of, like, their thoughts and emotions extremely well. Which I hadn't thought about that before, but I think that you are completely right. And I think that that's why the emotions hit so well, is because, like, that's where she's engaging all of her focus. You know, she's not interested in what people look like. I don't think you can find really a description of what anyone looks like, except that, like, Connell is tall and Connell thinks Marianne is beautiful. Like,
all of her women are fairly slim too, which is what a lot of, like, fat activist critics kind of hate. There's like, they're always like white and slim, and like, well, they're white because they're in Ireland, but
yeah. Have you been to Ireland? I lived in Dublin, and I can tell you how many black people I saw and where I saw them.
It is not a melting pot.
Yeah, and like, you will see black people, but like, most of them that I saw were like, literally. Do you guys have bathroom attendants in Australia?
No, we don't. Well,
okay, so
in some places, yeah.
Yeah, in a lot of, like, clubs in Europe in general, there's like a guy who just stands there and, like, hands you a towel. Yeah, and it's almost always an African immigrant, and that can feel pretty weird if you like focus too much on it. But it's kind of interesting because I watched the adaptation as well. And
tell me about it, because I haven't seen it.
So it's more diverse than the book, but at the same time, it's like, you know, people complaining that everyone's white. It's like, no one is described in the book.
Yes. Yeah.
You know? And so I think that allowed for some of the flexibility in the adaptation, where it's like Connell's, that psychiatrist that he meets in the show, she's black. And it's like, and I was like, oh, I didn't think she was black, but it's like, well, that's just because it's set in Dublin, you know. It's like, but there's no detail to her that would give you any thought about what her race is. And so Marianne's best friend at college in the show is also fat. So it's funny, maybe that was in reaction to people talking about her being fat phobic.
Is Marianne skinny though?
Oh yeah.
She has to.
She's a famous actress. Well, I don't know if she was famous before this, but I don't even know how famous she is now. It's funny, because I just don't know who famous people are anymore. Like, my wife and I, we were driving somewhere, and she was like, I can't even remember the term, a hall pass, you know, like, you can have sex with someone outside of your marriage and it's not a big deal, or it's it's agreed on. I think it's from Friends, but, she's like, who's a famous person that would be your hall pass? And I couldn't think of anyone who had been famous before like 2000, or who had been famous after like 2008. I was like, is Natalie Portman still famous? Like, she's like, well, what about like famous people now? I was like, I literally cannot think of a famous woman who hasn't been famous for 20 years.
Yeah, but that's because there's like not really any movie stars anymore as well. Like,
that might be part of it too.
That's part of it. But also, like, I completely hear you, because a lot of my friends are not that much younger than me, but are more like into like TikTok and shit like that. So there's a whole other world in TikTok of like really famous people, like people with followings of like multiple millions, who I've just never heard of. Like, they'll just mention, oh yeah, like, they'll say a name was mentioning this the other day, and I'm like, who?
Like, I think as the kids say, the most seen I've felt recently with regard to that stuff is like a meme on, I think I saw it on like Instagram, and it was like these two famous people like started dating, and the like the comment or whatever was like, I feel like they're just making up famous people now. I was like, yeah, because I literally, like, my first reaction when I read like the picture, I was like, who are those people?
Yeah.
But
I
like
love
said,
it though.
like,
I love
yeah.
not being with it. I just don't want anything to do with it. Like, it can just live over there, and I can just have my books and my books podcasts.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even use slang in my normal life, which some people have commented on and they think it's really funny, but I just don't. Even when I was like younger, I just always felt that slang sounded super awkward. And maybe it's because of how I look. But I was like, I'm not gonna say that. I'm not
What do
gonna
you
say
mean?
any of these.
What kind of slang? Just
Well,
like
like,
internet slang or something?
Well, that especially. But
Yeah.
like when I was growing up, people would be like, "That's tight."
Oh yeah.
That right now, that may be the first time I've ever said that's tight. Like,
That's really funny then that you're like friends with Kelby and David, because they use slang all the time.
love slang. Yeah. And I write in my books with tons of slang because I mean that's how people talk. But I personally just like, I don't know, I like never say any slang. Sometimes I use like really old slang because I think it's funny. I used to tell people like that they do something like, ah, man, groovy. Like I used to tell people that was like boss, and I thought that was really funny when I was like 19. They're like, hell yeah, man, that was boss as hell.
Yeah. Do you dig it, bro? Yeah.
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 I used to say that too.
The greatest hits.
Yeah.
Eddie Rathke's greatest hits. Yeah. That's actually one thing I wanted to talk about as well. As someone who lived in Ireland, that's something that I found peculiar, is that there wasn't really much Irish slang. Like it didn't have the, and I think this is a function of its success, because this could be literally set anywhere because there's no particularities the way that people speak. Like
the fact that no one ever said, "What's the crack?" in that book is astonishing, because you can't walk through Dublin in that time period without hearing that 1,000 times. But yeah, I mean, Ireland has a lot of slang, and there is, basically like none in here. I think I thought about that when I first read it, because I was like, well, that's kind of weird that people don't really talk like they're Irish. I mean, they do, but also they don't. It's like, to your point, it's almost like this could be set anywhere. It just happens to be set in Ireland. Yeah,
and maybe she has a sort of, like, whether she's conscious of it or not, a kind of larger point that, Western countries are pretty much all the same now because of the way that their societies and economies have been organized. So everyone has the same concerns. All the young people are like struggling with the same things, how to actualize in a way that is fulfilling when you can't own a house, you can't get a decent job. Like all this sort of stuff just happens everywhere in the Western world at the moment. So
I think slang is an interesting class topic.
Yes.
Because it is definitely different between classes. So I mean that's something she could have done. But like, despite there not being slang, I actually think the dialogue is really good in this book. And I don't often get to say that about contemporary fiction. I feel like a lot of even award-winning contemporary fiction or just literary fiction in general, I'll read it and be like, has this person ever met a person?
No, they haven't. That's the thing, is that, like, and this is I've complained about this on another episode, I think, that whenever people say, whenever their dialogue is bad, I just think they don't listen to people. And I feel like that is one of the main things you have to do as a writer. Like, especially if you're writing fucking dialogue, but generally as well, is you actually have to listen to people, like listen to what they're saying and listen to how they're saying it. And what the words, mean on one level, but what they might be communicating on another. Like, just the intricacies of that is so fascinating to me. And I don't understand why more writers don't like go in on that, And
I think it's weird. So for me, I feel like, I think I write really good dialogue, and it's my favorite kind of writing to do, but it's also like very instinctual. Like, I don't think about it. I just write it but I can hear, I don't know. This I think sounds it makes perfect sense to some people and makes no sense to other people. It's like when I read, I can hear it. You know what I mean? Like when you read a book, I can just like hear it happening. And I think a lot of people can't. And I think that that's how you can tell who's good at dialogue and who's not. It's like, if you read dialogue that feels like it's written by an alien, like this person can't hear their own book. Like they can write it and, you know, maybe grammatically and like, stylistically it's impeccable, but you're like it like, Don DeLillo can't read his books. They're, one of his books, I can't even remember which one, but, in the first few pages, there was like a bunch of dialogue and I was like, this is like embarrassing. Like this most famous of writers who people talk about being, you know, one of the best in the world currently writing. It's like, has he ever heard a person talk in his entire life?
Yeah.
Like they're like, oh, but like his sentences are so good. It's like, who gives a shit? Like, honestly,
I do
go write sentences.
Or like, but part of the thing about it as well is that you need to have a social life because you're writing about people. Like,
yeah,
you're writing about people. So like you need to interact with people, like, and that's how you not only write good dialogue, just make good characters, I guess, because you understand how people work and you have to constantly update your hardware there. Like you've got to, hardware or software. I don't know what the difference is, but like, but, and so that's why you need to be, if you want to be a good writer, I think you need to be out in the world. It can't just be hunched over a computer. You know, you got to listen to the world. But having said that, I love naturalistic dialogue and dialogue that sounds true. I do love and am guilty of writing this sometimes, a pontificating long speech. That no one would ever say in real life, but like it's always just fun to like put that in.
Yeah, and like sometimes, oh my god, sometimes it's like the goodness of that is by contrast. You know, if you the way people talk is generally by talking around things and people speak fragmentedly.
Yes,
and so I think it's really fun to kind of like bookend a big speech with like really naturalistic short dialogue and like the opposite of quippy. Like just people being like, wait, what? Like if you can have 3 questions in a row and then a speech and then followed by 3 questions in a row, it's like, that's probably pretty good.
Like, yeah. It's always just really entertaining and funny. Like it doesn't even matter what the content is. Like if there's like a really big speech and then like, a couple of really short sentences after that, it's just hilarious.
Yeah. And I think one of my favorite things is like having questions lead to questions lead to questions, where it's like just the like normal stupid kind of misunderstandings that like people say something and be like, what? And someone will be like, what do you mean? And you're like, no, like what did you say? And like, when? And it's like, it's stupid, but stuff like that I think makes and it's, you know, that is like 5 words or whatever, but like those 5 words add so much authenticity and like you know, liveliness to your dialogue, because they just like, you're like, yes, this is exactly how dialogue feels. And so like even if the rest of the dialogue is more stylized or like unnatural, because you inserted that like very natural stupid kind of dialogue into it, that like maybe an editor would say like, just cut those lines. It's like, no, those are the important lines. Like, even though it's only, you know, 5 or 6 words, it's like, those are the ones that make the rest of that's why I can do 500 word speech right here, is because of this stupid, like, sequence of miscommunications. And I think stuff like that is one of the things that people don't understand often either, where it's like, it's really minute, small details that is the actual difference between really good writing and really bad writing. Like, a lot of people will be like, oh, this guy, you know, like Don DeLillo, they're like, his sentences are impeccable. And I literally do mean like, who gives a shit? Because a book is not about sentences. Like, go write a sentence and like congratulate yourself, I guess. Like, but a book is so much more than sentences. And it's often these very hyper specific things that are the things that people are going to remember. You know, lines of dialogue that are honestly kind of stupid, but they make you laugh because they're stupid. Like the right kind of stupid. Those are the things that elevate a book in a lot of ways. Like you've probably written a book and been like, while you're writing it, you're like, oh man, I feel like I'm not doing this well. And then like you'll read it again and you'll maybe only make like 5 edits and you're like, man, now it's really good. You know, it's like,
yeah. Because it just needed to more of the, I think, who was talking about it? I think it might have even been the last episode of Agitator that you were on, talking about like a good book being like a good hang, you know, like you just, it's just hanging out with the characters and like, that really is all it is.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, you know, talk about big giant fantasy books, most people, and this was kind of my conception too, before I started reading a bunch of commercial fiction, is like, there's sort of the trope that we tell ourselves as literary people that like the reason genre books are successful is because they're full of like explosions and action scenes and stuff like that. And then you read one and it's 900 pages or whatever. And like 850 of those are just people hanging out.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, yeah, there is a big explosion and stuff like that. But it's like, it is often more character work that is severely lacking in a lot of literary fiction. It's because it's just all character work. Like, you know, Game of Thrones is a good example. Just endless amounts of character work and so many different characters.
Endless amounts of character. I thought you were going to say.
Yeah, I mean, basically. But, you know, that more literary novelists should read epic fantasy to learn how to write people. Because I think, you know, and this was kind of what I did, is I feel like I stole the good parts of good literary fiction and I've been able to shove that into genre fiction. But I think at this point, literary fiction, because so much of it comes through MFAs, and through people who haven't communicated with just regular people, you know, they part of how they got into publishing is because their dad's rich, you know, like, they did an internship in New York for free for 6 months. They're like, oh yeah, anybody can do this. Is like, almost no one can do that. No,
and in a world like that, I assume that conversations are often like bizarre performances and thus not genuine communication, you know? So that's why dialogue's probably so bad.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's something that I honestly think this book has a very funny and accurate critique of that kind of world as well, that you see through Connell, where he's like, I
the reading nights.
Yeah. But it's like, you know, he feels so self-conscious about giving his opinion in class. And even when he realizes that everyone else in his class hasn't read the books, but is just talking nonstop. And it's like, I feel like that is so much of what the literary world is. It's like people who haven't done the assignment talking with a lot of confidence. And,
that's what readings are. The reading night scene, that was like the best for me, because
I
like,
love that.
We've all been there. Like that was, I've been to like a couple and I'm just like, no more, because I felt exactly the same way, that it was all these people talking about books, back scratching, like, and the weird class dynamics as well. Like, I've only done 2 readings in my life, and both of them because someone asked me to, and they like, and I was like, I don't want to. And they're like, well, please. And I was like, fine. Yeah. I mean, I think the best idea for like, if you want to do like a book launch or something like that, if you've just published a book, is don't do a reading night, just have a party.
Yeah.
With like bands and shit. Like, if you want to do that, like, if
I ever do a reading again, I have some good ideas about how to do it. Like, the trick is to not read from a novel, because a novel is meant to be read quietly by yourself. And if you're reading a book quietly by yourself, or that's meant to be read quietly by yourself in front of like people, it's like, well, this is going to suck. So like, write something specifically to be performed.
That's a good idea, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I haven't done that because I don't really want to do readings, but maybe I will someday.
You can get brush up on your spoken poetry kind of performance style.
The awkward staccato delivery.
Yes. Let's talk about my vulva
for the next half hour. I actually was in a reading that was sort of like that. It was oh man, it was the most uncomfortable I've ever felt at a reading. Not because of like I mean, a little bit because of the subject matter. Well, mostly because of the subject matter, but only because like he was sharing it. It was an epic poem about his desire to be pegged by his wife.
Oh God.
And then like the mechanics of getting her to agree to do it. And then the shame and embarrassment on her face as she was fucking him in the ass. And I was just like, it was like 20 minutes, literally.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
And it was quote unquote a poem. And like, you are literally sitting there feeling like a captive. And it's like, listen, buddy, I got nothing against you getting fucked in the ass. Even reading a poem about that. But, this is the way this poem is written is like a diary entry that maybe should have remained a diary entry.
Like, the diary entry that they've just like pressed return randomly, so it's a line.
And it's like, yeah, it was uncomfortable, but yeah, readings are, it's such a weird part of the book world because like who actually wants that?
Yeah. No one does. Like it's just a thing they do because it's like this idea of like creating this false idea of a community, like we were talking about at the start. Like, and that's part of what it is. Well, you got to have events because if you don't have events, then it's not a community, and that's why it's always so awkward. And yeah, and
I think it's like it's almost this trying to recapture what was happening with Dickens way back when like people were waiting like at the dock of New York City for the next chapter to come in and someone would, grab it and like stand on a platform and read it to like, 1,000 people. It's like, they're trying to recapture that, but it's like, you're not Dickens.
No.
First of all, and no one was waiting for this. You're at a Barnes and Noble and I'm here because I just happened to be here. Like I was just going to pick up a book and, I saw that you were reading. So I thought I'd walk over and then I realized should have stayed away, but now I'm here and it feels rude to leave.
I love that. Well, did you have any other thoughts on this book, Normal People, and on
I have a lot of thoughts about it, but it is such a strangely, I think one of the interesting things about it is, like we said, that this became such a bestseller because it is in so many ways like an anti-commercial book. And because of how, in some ways it felt directly overlapping with my own experience in life and like a relationship that I had, it feels like too personal it just like feels too personal. And so like the fact that has been a book that like tens of millions of people have read and loved, it's like, that is so weird. Maybe that's not just me, which is of course probably the case, but I think that's often the trick, when the universal is in the hyper specific, and it's like the more specific you are to your own experience, like two things are going to happen. One, you're going to write it better because it's something that you're like obsessed with, or something like that. That's what I used to tell my students when I taught writing to teenagers. I just told them, I was like, follow your obsessions, whatever it is, because you care about that, and people are going to feel how much you care about it and how much you love it. And but what's weird about also that part is like you're going to be better at writing that thing that you're obsessed with, but also you're not the only person who's obsessed with that super niche thing in the world. And like this very strange kind of like toxic / loving relationship where you are constantly not able to properly communicate, but you love each other anyway, and almost in spite of it and because of it a little bit. It's like, because that's part of it too. It's like she understands Connell so well, even though he can't communicate, but it almost doesn't matter because she feels it anyway. Like, but at the same time, like one of the lines I love most is because he says obviously all the time.
Yeah.
And pretty late in the novel, he says like, I think it's pretty obvious that I don't want you to go. She goes, it's like nothing you do is obvious to me. And it's like, man, that's like the whole book is him thinking that like these like super small gestures are like these gigantic gestures, and everyone is like seeing it and aware of it. And they like, you know, it's like he blinked and he's like, oh, did people see me blink? You know? Like he's so anxious. And then, but yeah, to hear her say that too, you're just like, oh fuck, like this is their whole problem is they talk past each other, and they both understand each other perfectly and not at all.
Yeah.
And a big part of that is like the class difference. Like, you know, his inability to ask her to let him stay at her apartment. But then like when he finally does try to like begin that conversation, she reads it in 100% a different way. She's like, oh, he's breaking up with me. Like he's leaving me. And because she takes that tact, then he is like, oh, she doesn't want me to stay here. So he's like, do you want to see other people? And she's like, oh, he's telling me that he's going to like go fuck someone else. It's like these piling of miscommunications for people who love each other and do understand each other. It's I don't know.
It's a weird, like, cause yeah, when you lay it out like that, it's almost like a comedy of errors, but it's not a comedy.
Yeah. And I think that is like sort of the genius of it is like, if you turn this just a quarter way, it becomes Seinfeld.
Yes.
You know,
yeah.
But like, because of the age they are, I think is part of it. You know, you remember what it was like to be 17 through 20. It's like your body is exploding with emotions and you feel things so strongly that are so stupid. You know? Like, and you want to express who you are, which is such a dumb thing to care about. But like this need to tell strangers who you are and what you think about, kind of combined with like the fact that you're stupid.
Yeah. Also, that's something I think like, you know, people should tell young people if they don't already, is that, you know, expressing yourself, you're not even yourself yet. So why do you need to express it? You know,
but at the same time, it's like, I think it's good practice. I think that's why it's kind of a disaster that people have grown up online because they're not allowed to just be insanely wrong in public.
Yeah.
Every single day. Like, you know, when you were in college or just like anywhere, just like hanging out with your friends, you'll say something and someone will be like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And then instead of being like, oh, it kind of was, you're like, no, I'm right. And you know, you'll fight about it for like an hour. And then like 6 years later at 3 a.m., you'll remember that for no good reason. And you'll just be like, oh man, I'm so stupid.
I still am saying like incredibly dumb things, and I do it in a public forum on my podcast.
Yeah. I mean, I used to think that I was a very smart person. I actually used to think I was smarter than I am now, which is a weird thing. But I kind of know that I'm dumb now, and I just go around like with literally not a thought in my head. I just walk around empty, and then someone will say something. They'll be like, "Hey, what do you think of this book?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, I could monologue now." Like in some ways, I'm kind of like a robot that like is just kind of sitting there off until someone like pokes me, and then I'm like, "Oh, hey, what opinions do you need to hear?" You know?
Insert
I got a lot of them.
Insert coin for
like,
opinion.
And then so like I was talking to my friend about how like because he was asking me where I get the ideas for my essay, because I write 1 to 2 essays a week, and I was like, oh, I don't know, I don't really think about stuff until I write it down. He's like, that doesn't seem true. I was like, I don't know what to tell you. Like I just don't think about stuff.
They might be like ambiently floating around and you're not even aware of it. I mean, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't consciously think about stuff. It's like, to me, talking and writing is how I think. I had a teacher tell me that I think out loud, and I was like, hey, and I was like, oh, that's probably right. Like,
no, that's true. I remember saying that on like, I did some Writers Festival podcast a couple of years ago, that's how I work too. Like I basically write to think, like to work out what I think about something, I have to write it down, you know?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that's the only way I can formulate a coherent thought about something, I think.
Yeah. And I think part of it is like, because writing it down makes it sort of permanent-ish, or tangible, is like, you're like, oh, okay, so now I have to actually think about it. I have to, like, if I'm just saying something, it's like, who cares? No one heard me. No one's gonna remember in like 15 minutes. It's like, and I don't even care. Like, I don't know, I can say a lot of things. And there have been many times in my life where I'll be arguing a point, like I'll be, arguing with a friend about something stupid. And then like halfway through, I'll be like, oh, wait, stop. You're right. Sorry.
Yeah. Wait a minute. I don't actually think this.
Yeah. It's like, no. Well, and sometimes it'll happen like mid sentence. Like I'm defending my point and I'm like, oh, wait, no, that was wrong. Like, let me walk the last 45 minutes back. I disagree with what I said back then. You're right.
Past me was such a dickhead.
Yeah. It's like, I'm sorry I was so aggressive.
Yeah, but I actually think this book is like a lot of her books, well, all of her books, it is about that kind of young person becoming, testing the boundaries and expressing themselves, but also weirdly, the way they express themselves is kind of dumb as well, like, but purposely so. Like, they aren't actually able to articulate what they feel. Like in the first book, we talked about this in the first episode of this series, that Frances is putting up a front and communicates constantly, but it's never actually about what she actually feels. Like, she's trying to put on this like performance of unemotionality. Whereas in this one, kind of Connell is sort of the same in that he does these behavioral things that he thinks is communicating something, but isn't actually. And then their communications are miscommunications. And so they're talking a lot, but not actually a lot is getting understood. So I think that's a real interesting dynamic, particularly like with the exchanges between them, and their perceptions of things throughout the narrative.
Yeah. Well, it's like, even, the concept of exchange, it's like, I guess that's kind of like modern life though, at the same time. How much information is dumped into the internet by all of us every day, and how much is actually communicated. I was just looking, every once in a while I look at Twitter because, I don't know, maybe I'm a masochist. I don't know. I'm just an idiot. But, someone was sharing this interview that someone did in the New Yorker with an Israeli settler in Palestine. And like the quote tweet was like, talking about how this person was, broadcasting such horrible things, and like, how can they do this? And it's like, if you read the interview, it is very much like this person allowing the settler to kind of like hang themselves with their own rope. And it's like, this is what these people are saying. Like, look at it. It's like, and, it's like that. It's because no one clicks the link. No one reads past the headline. Like, most people learn news from like a retweet of a summary of an article that no one read. Like, even the editor of the publication probably didn't read the whole thing. And it's like, so we just have all this information that no one reads. It's kind of like, that's what academia is too. It's like, we have literal libraries filled up with dissertations that no one has read. And I mean no one. Like,
oh, I know.
Allegedly the faculty advisor at least read it, but it's like, probably not.
Yeah.
Like, and so much communication, so much exchange with nothing to show for it.
Yeah. And so that's what I think this book is sort of about.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way, but I think it's like, because it is, I don't know how much of the book is dialogue. At least half, probably like more like 3/4 of it is dialogue. And the amount of misunderstanding between the two characters who are on almost every single page together is astounding. Like, and
almost the only time they ever, and this is actually a very common trope in her writing, I think, the only time that they fully understand each other is when, not to put a too finer point on it, is when they exchange bodily fluids.
Ooh.
Yeah. When they're having sex, and it's sort of like, the sex scenes are actually really well done in this book, because that is a moment when they're both communicating very directly to each other.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, in part that experimental fantasy book that I wrote that everyone hated is kind of about that, where it's like,
I want to read
language
this now. You got to send it to
well,
me.
yeah, I found it on the Internet Archive yesterday. But I'm gonna republish it next year for its 10th
All right,
anniversary.
I'll buy it. You don't have to send it to me.
But a big part of that was the limits of vocal communication, and it's like so much more. The best way to communicate is with our bodies, honestly. Like the direct transmission of movement and behavior is so much more powerful in a lot of ways than, because the way we talk is so sort of counterintuitively non-communicative. You know, it's like I could sit, if we were like, I don't know, just hanging out and not talking about something specifically, we could have talked this whole time, and I would go home and my wife would be like, oh, like, you know, how's Matt doing? I was like, oh, I don't know. We were just talking. It's like, well, how's his family doing? It's like, no idea. Like, we didn't talk about that. It's like, well, what did you talk about? Cause I mean, that's what she'll say. She's like, oh, like, you know, how's his wife or how's his boyfriend or whatever. And I'm like, oh, didn't come up. Like, you were there for 3 hours. Like, what did you talk about? Like,
yeah, I mean, yeah. And normally the 3 hours is great. Like you have a good time. Well, especially if you're with someone for 3 hours, you better have had a good time. Like, why would you be there for 3 hours? But yeah, I do. And this is something that I've really been, sort of championing and doing is, meeting up with like people that you've met online. Cause that's something that I actually actively do. And it is about, I don't want to say it's about body language, but it is like getting to know someone beyond these little screens, you know? Like,
yeah, exactly.
I'm sure you're much bigger in real life. Like, and that's, that's something that that is actually funny when you know someone from, like just Zoom rooms basically, or like on Instagram or something. And you meet them in real life and like, oh, they're much bigger. I am not much bigger. Everyone assumes I'm like over 6 foot, but I'm like 5'8". So just putting that out
normal size fella.
Yeah.
Some people think I'm tall. I'm like, I'm also a normal size fella. I'm like, I'm not quite 6 feet. But so it's funny that you mentioned that, because that I would say is how JDO and I became like actual friends. We had known each other through the internet, and we'd met a few times at like different writer conferences. But he just, I forget when. It was around the time that I stopped like using the internet. He just like started calling me like on the phone. Cause we live like, you know, 1,000 miles apart or more. And I just answered, and like, you know, this is a guy that I had basically at that point, barely talked to. I mean, both barely talked to, but also talked to a lot, you know, like in that weird kind of like, we know each other over the internet kind
internet-y way. Yeah.
But then like, since then, this is probably, you know, like 2016 or something like that. He just started calling me out of the blue, and we would talk for like 3 hours or something like that. And I was like, oh man, after like a few years, I was like, I think we're really good friends. And, it's exactly what you're talking about. It's just, and that's what he said too. He's like, I decided to just start calling people. I was like, oh, weird. But also like, why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah, I love that. I love talking to people on the phone. It's such a throwback to the early 2000s when you used to talk to people on the phone, you know? Yeah,
I mean, like some of my best friends, one of them, he just moved back after basically living out of, across different states for the last 18 years. And I would almost never talk to him when he lived abroad, but like, or he wasn't abroad, when he lived outside of this state. Whenever we would like talk on the phone, we'd talk for, you know, like hours, and then we wouldn't talk for like a year and a half. You know, it's like, it's funny how friendships can just like pick up exactly where they left off. But also different ones can not do that. And I think that this book kind of has that too. Like when Connell goes home and he talks to the guy who kills himself, it's like it's both this, it's not so much that it's different than it was before, because they're like having the same kind of like ritual friendship that they used to have. It's just that neither of them are those people anymore. And so it's really like awkward and like weird. Whereas every time he meets up with Marianne again, it is literally, it feels like they just picked up where they left off.
Yeah.
Even if where they left off was like terrible.
Yeah. But that sort of, you can't really find out if you actually have that kind of friendship unless you actually meet up with someone.
Yeah, for sure.
Like you need to have that kind of connection, I guess. And that is all about physical interaction. I don't mean like you have to have sex with all your friends, but like,
but you do.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's a real, I don't know what my point was with that, but I just think it's really important if you have internet friends, people who you really like, that you should actually meet up with them.
Yeah, because I think,
make the effort.
I've been thinking about this more and more for a lot of different reasons. Some of them just maybe hope, but people used to joke about how like how out of touch it was to say like the internet is a fad. But I think in the long run it is. Yes. And I think the long run is almost at its endpoint. Like,
I've been thinking about this actually. I was thinking about this the other day because I feel like a lot of people my age and younger, like sort of elder millennials and slightly younger, are sort of a bit burnt out on the internet. Like so many people I know of this age are just like deleting their Instagram, their Facebook, their Twitter, and just going out and doing things. And it's wonderful to see. I
mean, it's funny how like you instantly feel how much better it is.
Yes.
I mean, I often think of politics because I'm a very stupid person, but I think of it especially with regard to that, like how the internet has sort of like neutered political action, because so many people think that changing your profile to like, I don't know, some fucking thing is the same thing as like going to a like in-person protest or like organizing your community or like doing anything that has material value. Like, well, I tweeted about it. It's like, yeah, cool. I'm sure you're proud of yourself, but because it gives you that same, or it gives you enough of like a good feeling and a feeling of accomplishment and like, a feeling of like, I'm involved. Like you don't have to do more than that. And that is like the worst fucking thing in the world for politics, at least. But also for people, it's like, it sucks that it feels good when the most communication I've had with one of my friends is like, he like liked my Instagram story or whatever. It's like, that's not real. That's nothing. Like,
yeah.
Talk to each other. Yeah, like just spend any amount, even spend 10 minutes in person with each other, and it is a billion times better.
So much so. And also like usually if you've kind of found people online, there is a reason. You have some kind of common interest or whatever. So it's not going to be like just like meeting a random person off the internet. It's going to be, you're going to have things in common. But yeah, you have to step over that kind of online gap, I think, just to, people say that they have online friends, and I'm just like,
not real.
It's not real. And also I've seen people like spiral and have absolutely unhinged rants, mostly on FKA Twitter, where they kind of like are saying like, oh, and my friend, they don't even say online friends. They say, oh, and my friends haven't stood up for me in this, like, whatever controversy is going on or whatever. I'm like, bitch, these aren't your friends. They're like anonymous posters on the internet. Like,
or they'll be like, my community's not standing with me. It's like, this is not a community.
Yes. Yeah.
Like this is literally nothing.
Yeah. It's a bunch of accounts.
Yeah. It's funny because, so when I lived in Ireland, I was going to England to visit somebody, but before I was going there, I can't remember how the mechanics of it worked, but this guy that I only knew through a message forum for Chuck Palahniuk, I mentioned in there that I was going to England. He was like, "Oh, come stay at my apartment with me," and like we had been on the forums together for like a year, he had been there for a long time. He was like, you know, an old school person on the forum. I was like relatively new because I don't know, but I was like, oh, fine. And if it's weird, I will leave. You know, is like my internal thought. But we had a great time, and I spent like 5 days at his apartment, just like mostly talking, which is funny. It was like the most I've talked to someone that I just met ever.
Mostly talking. So you like Eddie said, have sex with your friends.
It feels way better. And
right.
You can talk about it later. Remember when we fucked? Yeah, that was super gay.
All right. Did you have any final thoughts on this wonderful book?
No, I mean, I love this book and I've heard a lot of criticism since I first read it. So I was kind of curious how I would feel about it coming back. And I was like, man, the thing that this book does, it does it so masterfully that I understand people's criticisms, but it's also, at least to me, it's kind of like beside the point. It's like you're wanting this book to be different than it is. And the fact that it is just like this very hyper specific thing, and the fact that it does it better than almost any other book that I've read is kind of makes it at least a minor masterpiece.
Yeah. I think it's really good. Having read all of them now, I do think it is, well, I think it's the second best. I think Conversations with Friends is still the best. But then I think she's doing this thing, very similar things over and over again, which I think is I think there are two types of artists, and there's one who does the same thing over and over again and then just sort of like perfects that throughout their career.
Right.
And then there's the other who has to do something different every time, you know?
Yeah.
So
there are disadvantages to both. The disadvantage for the one who keeps doing the same thing for me is when I find a writer, I will, you know, gobble down like 10 of their books. And if you read 10 books that are sort of like iterative, it's like, oh man, this guy sucks. When it's like, no, he or she is like, just, they're not expecting you to shotgun, you know, 10 of their books in like 2 months because that's not how they came out. It's kind of like, so, but her third book was my least favorite, I think. And
okay, interesting.
I don't know that I'll read her next one. Probably I will. I'm sure I will, but you know, how could I not? Not as excited for it.
So if people want to find you, where can they find you? If you want them to find you.
I do want people to find me now after my hermitage. You can go to radicaledward.substack.com, and I post at least weekly, usually multiple times a week. And from there you can find my books and my other dumb stuff that I got going on.
Yeah. Really, you put really good essays up on there, like that just fly out of your head, apparently.
Yeah, thank you.
Because you have himbo, no internal monologue, apparently.
I am just a dumb person. I used to be smarter. And I think the experience of being smarter, it's like muscle memory. Like I can still feel like a smart person to people who don't realize how stupid I am now.
Yeah. I think that might just be aging. Because I used to have a mind like a steel trap, and now I just forget. I forget, like, I'll be in the shower and I'll be like, did I wash my hair? And that was like literally a minute ago, you know?
So that's especially funny with books because, so I started, several years ago, like reviewing everything I read on Goodreads. And I usually do it like, you know, within a few hours of when I finish the book. Not always, but usually. And sometimes even like minutes after finishing a book, I will not remember the main character's name. Like when I first reviewed Normal People on Goodreads, I remember I had to look up on Wikipedia what the characters' names were. And I read this book in like 2 days. So it's not like it was like I was reading it like half an hour over the course of like 2 months or something. It's like I was so enmeshed in this book. Their names are said so many times. And I was like, wait, who are those people? Like,
they're normal people. That's who they are. Normal person one.
Yeah.
Normal person two.
Yeah. It's like, it's girl and boy. Perfect. Yeah. I got
it. All right. Thanks so much, Eddie, for joining me in the second part of this journey.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
I'll be downtown cause my heart is always there. Ride in the streets, baby don't you dare. Kick my dreams to the curb, not fair. We were downtown, we were downtown, we were downtown. Don't forget that we were there. Take me to the top, throw me through the air. I hit ground like I'm never even there. I'll be downtown, I'll be downtown, I'll be downtown cause my heart is always there. Ride in the streets, baby don't you dare. Kick my dreams to the curb, not fair. We were downtown, we were downtown, we were downtown. Don't forget